Hey bass anglers, are you pretty fly for a bass guy? Stick around, we're going to talk about a technique that is going to get you bit in a difficult transition period of bass fishing in the springtime. So the hair jig is an effective technique to use during this transition period in the springtime where the bass have moved up, the water's warmed up, they've spawned, and now they're moving out. So there's a whole transition period in there where fish are coming up, and a portion of them are doing something, and then they're transitioning out of it. And that can happen in a very short window of time because it relates to the moon phase and temperatures, and the window's not big. But it can be a very tricky time. And then you throw in weather on top of that, and you can get a slick, calm, sunny day where you've got bass in a bunch of different transition periods, and there can be techniques that are better than others. A lot of people are out there throwing their favorite, their confidence bait. Maybe they're throwing a tube, maybe they're throwing a Texas rig, and you could be fishing right past fish that are in this transition period or are acting a certain way. So we're going to talk a little bit about the situation and the technique. Okay, so the situation. We're in that springtime. The water warmed up, bass moved up, they're going to spawn, then they're going to move out. And that transition period can be tricky when you throw at it the weather situation. You get a slick, calm, sunny day, and some of the fish aren't on the beds. So some are, some aren't. And so you got this transition, the bite window's gone for the day. You might be in the middle of the day and things get tough, and they can be tough. And this David Dudley video I'm going to pull up right here, he's got a diagram in there that really resonated with me on what fish are doing and what percentage of fish are where. And then you mix in the conditions, the weather conditions, and you can have a tricky situation where you need a solution. And our hair jig is going to be the solution to it. But if looking at the diagram that David has up here, you can see that if there was 10,000 bass in this area, and you're in the middle of the springtime here, you could have half of them in one scenario and half of them in another scenario. And one half could be split in half. You could have half spawning, half fry garters, and the other half transitioning out. And he calls those floaters, those confused fish, and typically those are suspended. You'll see in his video he might call for them to be suspended. So they're floating, confused, and suspended, so that's half your fish. And then the other half of your fish are spawners and fry garters. And typically fry garters are feeding up. They're looking for things swimming by that could be threatening their fry, and the spawners are locked onto a bed and might just be protecting a bed. So if you're going around and you're like, man, the bite's terrible here, you know, you're flipping a Texas rig and it's falling down past these fry garters and these suspended confused fish, half the fish are out of play. You've taken them out of play by going down to the bottom, and if you're not specifically on a bed, you can be having difficulty, and you could be blaming it on the weather, or you could be blaming it on, and you just didn't know that the fish are in this transition, and you're fishing for a quarter of them, or less than a third of them for sure. So back to the hair jig. The hair jig is an effective technique, and I got some videos out there, and black is the standby. You've seen it with smallmouth anglers. They'll throw, here's an 1/8 ounce black hair jig, and they'll throw that thing in cool water conditions, they say, and they'll, you know, I think a lot of people have restricted them to cool water conditions, and it is the tool to help you during this transition period where you've got half the fish fry guarding maybe, and another more than half maybe confused and suspended. And they'll feed, but they need a very natural presentation, and the hair jig is going to give you a very natural presentation. And I'm here to talk about more than just the black one here today, but the black one is my go-to. I'll use a 1/8 ounce hair jig. It's got the marabou hair on it. This one's by 3G Smallmouth Solutions, who makes my custom hair jigs. I always get customs, but any hair jig is better than no hair jig. So get hair, you're going to be throwing it. It's natural, and that's a key to it. It's up in the water columns. You're throwing this and you're reeling it in the top foot of the water column typically. I mean, I'll slow down if the water's cooler, but typically I'm reeling this thing high. But I'm here today to talk about expanding beyond just the black. And I've got a whole bag of colored hair jigs that I've got specially made by 3G Smallmouth Solutions. And the reason I have this is because there's a lot going on in the ecosystem this time of year. And you need to be prepared to match what's going on and to be experimenting through this transition period with floaters and confused fish that are suspending. Fry garters are typically going to be active against the things that are attacking their fry, right? And one of those might be perch, young perch of the year. Perch get out there, and bluegills and perch will get on fry. And here's a something that's different than your standard black hair jig. Here's a magnificent custom perch hair jig. That's going to be deadly for fry garters. And this is just swam it through the water column, high in the water column in that top foot, throw it out and reel it in. And you'll see in this particular tournament that's going on right now for Major League Fishing on Lake Eufaula, they're just chucking and winding a chatterbait. And when the bite dies in the middle of the day, they blame it on the weather conditions. It's slick, calm, it's whatever. But they're just chucking and winding. So put down the chatterbait after the shad spawn bite window is done for the morning, and pick up a hair jig and get natural and get subtle and start imitating the things that are out there in the ecosystem that might be suspended, that a fry garter or a floater that's suspended and is transitioned out of fry guarding, or the female that's transitioned out of fly guarding is looking for a natural meal. And she might grab a perch, or she might grab any manner of bug that's in the ecosystem that is above her, so that she can fish it suspended. So I'll have a brown one, right? I have my black one, I have a brown one, I'll get a perch colored, I'll get a bait fish colored one. And again, these are all 1/8 ounce that that's got maybe some olive and some white. So browns, olives, whites. I've also got one in here that's gonna imitate crayfish on the bottom that's got some reds in it. Some reds and oranges in it, right? So that's an active crayfish going by. So hair jigs are the answer to catching those fish. I can't tell you how many tournaments I've been in when we're in this transition period between spawners, fry garters, and the suspending females that are done before they go out and really start to feed up and get in their summer haunts, that they want to be near shallow water where things are warming up, but they're done with the active spawning. And especially on those slick, calm days, it can be hard to trick those fish anymore into biting. And like if you're throwing a Texas rig, you're shooting them right past those suspended fish, and typically they're not going to follow it down and bite it yet. They'll get back oriented to cover where they're trying to ambush things, then they'll start to get on the Texas rig stuff again. But that's going to develop. But everybody who's bass fished knows this transition period time can be tricky. Throw in a flat, slick, calm day, and you need a tool. And I'm telling you, the tool is to get yourself a 7-foot, 2-inch medium action with a fast tip rod, something long. Get some light braid line. I use Reaction Tackle and Veravas lines. I use low diameters. I'll use a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader. And then I'm using a 1/8 ounce hair jig, and then I'm mixing up my colors. But I've got a hair jig on at all times in this transition period, and I catch big fish. You'll see in my video here, they're trying to weigh a non-scoreable because they're chucking a chatterbait at them. You can catch the bigger fish if you get natural, get subtle, get on a hair jig, and throw it through this suspended transition period time. You're going to get the bigger fry garters, and you're going to get the females that are feeding up, that are suspended, that can't be tricked by the simple stuff anymore. Now you got to be more nuanced in your approach. So don't be afraid to get hair. Make sure you fly like the bass guy, and you'll weigh in fish that others can't catch because they're not using it. And there's not one pro in that MLF tournament there that I'm watching that's got a hair jig on that's throwing it. You can throw it and wind it just exactly like they're pitching and winding their chatterbait. They could be throwing and winding this hair jig and getting bit with quality fish. And I'm sure a person could do well in one of these tournaments that's, everybody's just got a chatterbait on, or they're just chucking a wacky rig Senko at the inside edges of docks. I don't see many subtle hair jigs used here. People think it's just isolated for clear smallmouth waters when the water's cold. Absolutely not. A lot of quality fish I've caught in this transition period in the mid-spring, late springtime. So tie one on, and you'll be glad you did. Hope this tip was helpful. Please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time on the water.